Many still imagine that the first explorers of the vast Pacific Ocean made their discoveries purely by accident. Here we will tell a different story, one that involves paying close attention to birds. Birds played a key role in Pacific cultures. Their meat and eggs provided food. Their bones were used as tools, needles for sewing, weaving and tattooing. Their feathers, particularly red ones, were highly valued for adornment. Birds were seen as messengers, sent by other islanders, ancestral spirits, or by the gods, at times predicting the weather or guiding fishermen to dense shoals of fish. But here we will focus on those birds that traditionally served Pacific mariners as aids to discovering new lands. In the Middle East, the concept of using birds in this way can be traced back more than 4,000 years to a creation myth referring to Noah's Ark, the flood, and the return of his dove with an olive branch. Similarly, in the Western Pacific, the creation myths of Samoa refer to Lupe and Tuli flying over the ocean in search of dry land, a concept that presumably dates back to when these islands were first discovered by people, a discovery that was evidently made some 3,000 years ago. In Samoa, the creator god Tangaloa sent his daughter Sina in the form of a pigeon to locate the first dry earth. Here, the Pacific imperial pigeon, or lupe, regularly flies between the islands in search of seasonal abundances of fruit. Islands shown in green here, and which correspond to the route by which West Polynesia is believed to have been settled. In another Samoan tradition, it was Tuli, a son of Tangaloa, who surveyed the surface of the earth looking for land. Tuli is a local name for the Pacific golden plover. In September, large flocks of these birds are returning from the Arctic to their southern feeding grounds on Pacific islands, a potential clue to the whereabouts of land not just in mythology but also in real life. In the tropical Pacific, the main bird species that indicate land nearby are fairy tern, brown booby, and black noddy. All can be relied upon to return to land at night, so their direction of flight is significant at dawn and dusk, and also when a bird is seen carrying a fish in its beak heading home to feed its young. At times birds were also carried aboard the canoes, particularly frigate birds, rails, plovers, red-tailed tropic birds, herons and sooty terns. At least two traditional Polynesian sea shanties describe how frigate birds, for example, would take their rightful place, poised upon the towering prow as the eyes of the navigator. These non-instrument wayfinding techniques are still used on a local level, but the Pacific as a whole is huge. It extends across about 1/3 of the whole planet, and most islands in this vast tract of ocean are tiny. Easter Island, or Rapa Nui, is a good example. It is less than 3 times the size of Manhattan Island, yet as distant from its nearest neighbour as Mexico is from Canada. It is both tiny and remote. Without the help of birds, the chances of finding it are slim, to say the least. A good example here is sooty terns, whose navigational use is recorded in traditional voyaging chants. The black tern is my bird in whom my eyes are gifted with unbounded vision. For much of the year, sooty terns are roaming the ocean, but in spring they make their way back to their native colonies, often in spectacular numbers. From here they continue to head away on foraging flights of up to 480 kilometers or more. But the number of birds encountered within 40 to 80 kilometers of the colony become conspicuous. Their calls can be so loud, even after dark, that they signal the presence of their colony into the night too. The bird's capacity to guide voyagers suggests that this may be connected with the birdman cult rituals previously practiced here, a ritual in which competitors would swim out to this offshore islet of Motunui to retrieve the first sooty tern egg of the season. Similarly, in the case of New Zealand, Polynesians almost certainly knew of its existence well before they reached it. And the reason is that these islands are a global hotspot for seabirds. Here, a good example is the sooty shearwater. In early October, some 20 million of these birds are heading southwest across the equator from their feeding grounds in the North Pacific to nesting sites in and around New Zealand. 20 million may sound like a lot of birds, and it is, but this is nothing compared with the numbers that were making this migration when the first Polynesians were exploring the region. For rats later invaded their mainland nesting sites. Such a river of birds passing through here in spring is clearly pointing to the whereabouts of land and a plentiful supply of eggs and chicks, a traditional source of food. In the course of a single year, these birds would trace a giant figure of 8 across the entire Pacific, as seen on this satellite map. Of special interest to the navigator is the fact that the timing of these global translocations is dependent on seasonal changes in the winds. As one of the original Polynesian voyaging chants puts it, "Mine is the migrating bird, flying on even beating wings to lands revisited, ever searching out the road of the ocean. It is the road of the winds, coursed by the sea kings to unknown lands. Mine is the bird." This particular chant is called Pathway of the Birds and is the title of a book covering the remarkable voyaging achievements of Polynesians, a book that has gone on to receive several awards and commendations.